100 years ago, on a different YouTube channel, I had a video series about drawing cool video game characters, in which I drew the really cool video game character Ball from Rocket League. This video is still gaining traffic for some reason, and there was a request made upon it for a tutorial of drawing the Ball from Rocket League. This, of course, is the drawing from all those years ago. I don't even think it was that many years ago, but it's not even that good. Literally just copied from a promotional artwork for the game. But I do think there's a real learning opportunity here. This is something that I've can certainly improve on if I tried it again. And there are some interesting skills that I think you can learn from drawing something boring like this, namely the concept of shape and form. You see, last time I just looked at a reference and copied it pretty much. I was maybe being a little bit, maybe we'll put the reference up next to it, a little bit conscious of where and why some of the shapes were where they were. I can see a few substantial errors that were basically me just being lazy. As you can see, there's like 3 shapes kind of surrounding this little triangle thing here, and the top one is pretending to both be this little shape here and the other thing on the side, which I didn't really understand. And so for a tutorial, if you guys want to draw this ball yourself, I've picked out a few pieces of reference that might be a little bit more informative. I'm not going to copy either of them. Instead, I'm going to use both of them to try and get an understanding of what the ball is, the shapes around it, kind of their purpose and pattern, and use that to make my own drawing of the ball. Fortunately for us, a ball really isn't all that complicated of a shape. So before I go into any sort of real illustration, as we see here, like a full attempted final drawing, I'm going to do a little bit of preliminary sketches to try and understand what's going on with the ball. Now obviously we got a sphere here. That's typically the form that most balls take. And what I'm noticing when consulting these references is that essentially we have a kind of, in the same way that a soccer ball has a pattern of shapes along the surface of the sphere, this ball has another sort of pattern of shapes where you have this little triangular disc here featured on this reference. Probably, I would assume, on either side of the ball here. And you have little connecting bands, which would be both these ones and these ones. And I've drawn it as though there's 2 here, but looking at it closer, I think there's actually 3 of each. One coming down from each little triangle thing here. So if I was gonna do that, it would actually probably be this shape, and this shape. So this is a kind of an ugly sketch, but what we're starting to understand is the real nature of the ball, and that's what we're truly trying to capture here. So another thing that I typically think about when trying to draw something is the gesture. Now this can be a really fun thing to do, especially when it comes to subjects like human beings or animals, when there's almost like a real storytelling that you can start to do with the way that object, well, in the case of a human, I don't know if you'd refer to those as objects, but the way that a person, an animal, or whatever it is moving, there's certain ways that you can express that movement through the gesture. Now with a ball, there's still going to be a gesture. It's going to be a little harder to make that interesting into a kind of a storytelling device. Sometimes you might see, like in cartoons or whatever, if there's a baseball or something being thrown or hit, you might have it almost like a comet, so that it has like a bit of a tail to it, you know? Really the end of the ball is here, but it's kind of going this way. I suppose we could try something like that for this Rocket League illustration. I don't think I will. I am just making this up on the fly. The thing that we're probably going to have more luck looking into, not more luck, but that I'm going to focus on is just understanding the details and the shape and form of the ball. If I got skilled at drawing the ball from Rocket League, which I don't intend to, but if I did, then I might try something a little more dynamic with it. But if we do something where we're distorting the form of the ball and doing speed lines and this sort of thing, it's going to take away from our understanding of this form at the moment. And I don't feel like putting that much effort into this. Another thing that I'm slowly noticing and looking at these references is that this top shape here that I outlined there and the bottom shape as well are not really circles as I drew them there. They're more like a little fidget spinner kind of looking thing. See, it's got like this that sort of shape going on that I'm tracing over there. So that's going to be helpful for our understanding of this. I'm going to try to pick an angle at which to establish this shape. So I'm not going to treat this as a final sketch at the moment. Really just trying to lay down these shapes, simplifying them and kind of winging it for the purpose of laying out on the paper like how I want to approach it. So I don't really have a perfect representation here. These shapes are kind of challenging to work with on the surface of a sphere because I've got to keep in mind that I can't just be drawing this flat shape as I see it here. I've got to imagine that flat shape as being curved on the surface of the ball, right? So trying to show that from this angle is not something I have a whole lot of practice doing, and it isn't something that I've pulled off entirely here. But check it out. I think we have something going on here. So with this relatively lackluster understanding in place, what I am going to do now is really zero in, really focus, and put this time that I've invested into understanding the shapes and the design of the ball into my own more completed illustration based on this little sketch that I've developed here. Again, it really isn't that interesting. The ball from Rocket League isn't the most fascinating subject, in my opinion, for a piece of visual artwork. The reason I thought it was a cool character would have to have been the character development. You see, I just felt that the ball in Rocket League was quite the well-rounded character, if you can understand what I'm trying to say. Now, as you attempt your own illustration, maybe you do want to copy me or one of the references directly, and honestly, that's probably going to end up with a better result. But if you're doing so, then I would recommend that you're keeping in mind the shape and the form, and you're trying to at least sort of understand why you're putting the things where you're putting them. Just hold on for 1 second. One thing to consider, as I mentioned this challenge, over here, where is it, of putting the flat shape, which has an intricate design, on top of the curved surface. One thing that I'm doing here, that's good, is we have a center line contour line, right, which follows the shape, the 3D shape of the ball, and it's based on the perspective of how close or far away we are from different parts of the design. So as even just a guiding line, I'm placing this circle to sort of inform where some of these shapes are going to be. And you'll notice, as at least I've tried to demonstrate, that the closer side of it is bigger than the further away side, right? This is probably pretty intuitive, basic understanding of perspective. So when laying down what would on this flat shape be a two-dimensional circle, I'm treating it more like an oval, kinda, and an oval with like a big side, and essentially having, this is a weird place to do this since there's a drawing in the way here, but we see this larger section. I think you understand what I mean, right? Especially after laying it out like this. But yeah, and it's from this that I have a bit of a reference of the other shapes that are going to be there, right? So when there's a triangle, this isn't a triangle, but I'm looking at this shape here. The one over here is going to be smaller than the one over here, right? Because it's on the farther away side of the ball. Bearing in mind this understanding of the 3D shape, as I add any line, man, this is the thing I didn't think about and was having trouble with over here. But as we lay the features of the ball in to the drawing, I'm keeping in mind the three-dimensional shape of the sphere, and that's telling me where all these shapes go. I mentioned the perspective just now with how far away something is, but if we even looked at, say, a human face, right, this is something I've been practicing recently, so I can probably just quickly put a representation of it here, right? If I was gonna draw a face paint, say this is a face paint design on a human's face, I wouldn't just draw it like this. I wouldn't just draw exactly how I put it there. No, that's silly. I would keep in mind the 3D nature of the face to inform at which angle the face paint went. Incidentally, this face paint is directly on top of this individual's eye. In any case, insofar as we're concerned about the ball, it's a similar thing with the triangular shapes. As I'm looking at this, we're sort of starting to see some of the design take shape, certainly more clearly than I did over here. But one thing that I've done an imperfect job of, and I'm not going to go back and fix it because I'm too lazy, and this is the ball from Rocket League. Like, I'm not having very much fun drawing this. But when we're looking at not only, okay, so we're looking at the contour of the ball and the perspective of the shapes on the surface of the ball, so which shapes are bigger, smaller, and along which contours are they situated. But one thing that I haven't taken into consideration perfectly is the spacing between these elements. I've kind of just eyeballed where each of these three triangular shapes should go, and their placement was important because I've kind of been using them as guidelines for where all of the other shapes should go. And I think if you can notice here, even though there is a little bit of foreshortening, right, That's what I was explaining before, that I didn't use the word for it. But even though there's a bit of that, we are probably seeing a little bit too much of a small space here and a large space there. If you look at this drawing, for example, this isn't all that different of an angle, and they're kind of equally jutting out, whereas mine are a little bit more like this, right? Instead of like this. That looks basically the same. Like, you know what I mean. These are probably all equal angles, whereas these, okay, these are way bigger. See what I mean? So that's a mistake that I'm just going to live with. Admittedly, as we were talking about gesture, I think it does make a little bit more of an interesting line of gesture here with that shape. I'm not going to fix it either way because, I don't know, you see here, if you're looking at the gesture of that, it's a little weaker. But I didn't do that intentionally, so when you're laying out these shapes, that's another thing to keep in mind. I've also noticed that I've made another very interesting mistake. It is very much along the same lines as the last one. If you observe on this reference right here, you see this line here? This is, in the scheme of things, a very, very short distance along, what would this be? On my drawing, and again, this is largely accidental, it goes from about here to here. Now you don't see a lot of it because this is basically the end of the ball here, but yeah, I'm not entirely sure how that happened specifically, but I'm sure it has something to do with my initial misplacement of these in using them as the guiding lines. Now, if I had decided that I liked this gesture, right, and this was really how I wanted to make the ball, maybe it would be the case that I'd have to adjust the rest of the ball to fit that, and that means that there's a big space here. Now it's at the edge of the ball, so it's kind of out of sight, and this is the ball from Rocket League. I don't care about this drawing, so I'm gonna leave it. But just another interesting mistake that I made that I thought was kind of noteworthy. Probably, unless you're insanely good at this, you might be making similar mistakes as you go along. And that's great. Just learn from it and keep drawing. Now, as a result of that, I'm contemplating placing this wherever I'm going to place it. I think from this angle it would probably be like here. Yeah, I think that's fine. Because I was going to try to put it here and like, oh, I know it's out of sight, but I want to draw this thing. And knowingly put it in completely the wrong spot. But I don't know, I think this isn't bad. Maybe it's even a little more this way. Yeah, so isn't that interesting how this one mistake, or if you're really a fan of this gesture, you might call it a happy accident. But whatever it was, the placement of these initial features, which I used as a guiding line, is now affecting the rest of the ball. So, what do you know? It's all connected. Everything's relies on one another. We are also getting pretty close to rendering stage. So I think that's probably going to be one of the more exciting parts. If there can be an exciting part to drawing the ball from Rocket League, but I digress. Shading the ball, giving it texture, and working out the light source and all the rest of that. That's not what we're doing now, but it will be very shortly. Now, I have noticed something with this shape here. I think I've added too much to it. Following this reference, we're looking at a bunch of very interesting, intricate shapes. The way I see it, I've kind of gone overboard. I think it's been a relatively okay attempt at trying to stay faithful to the details in the reference. But when you have this amount of detail and it's a really small part of the drawing, you're looking at, I think I was even pressing harder just without thinking about it. It's starting to draw, because I think this is understandably, reasonably the area of the drawing that we really want to focus on, right? This is probably going to be the most interesting focal point of the drawing, and we'll probably get back to that in the rendering part of this. So for that reason, I'm gonna keep this guy, this little light. Now, I don't know why they need a light on the ball. You know, it looks cool. There you go. Whatever. Although, to be honest, I don't even think the ball even looks that cool. Like, it's just got a bunch of shapes on it. Like, I don't know. I think sports balls, they look cooler when they're simpler, you know? Like, when I used to be in like high school and all that, and they used to have volleyballs, there'd be the lame volleyballs from like the 1990s that had like a million different colors on them, and they tried to have like a cool design, you know. But then there was the cool minimalist volleyball that had like just pure white, you know. Rocket League's a cool game. I think it would be marginally better if the ball was just a soccer ball, like just a white ball. There's probably like modifications you can do to, I know you can like make it a square ball, which I guess ceases to be a ball at that point. But anyway, kind of lost focus there, which is really understandable because after all, I am drawing the ball from Rocket League. So just trying to distract myself from that very mundane reality. So I think we'll just about call it a day with regards to laying down the shapes. We're going to dive right into rendering. So that's more or less where the strength, whatever strength there is, comes in this drawing. Yes, I was copying directly from a reference. Yes, it's the ball from Rocket League, but it's, for whatever reason, this old video, it's still gaining views. There seems to be a sense that, yeah, this is a cool drawing because of how well it's rendered. Don't know where I was going with that, but essentially when we're gonna look at this one, first I'm gonna decide on a light source. Like, we could do a few different things here. We could try to make it really put a lot of contrast in there. Try for a really high contrast. That's completely out of there. Yeah, you know what I mean. High contrast or like lower contrast drawing. The thing that I want to use contrast for in this drawing is, as I've sort of alluded to earlier, to draw attention to this area of the ball. In this drawing, this area, which is a light, it is lit. This is kind of grayed out. I don't know if it looks like I kind of smudged that accidentally. It might be the lighting, because this is just a picture of the drawing. The idea is that this should be the lightest part of the drawing here. And there's another light here, but I don't know if we're really going to see that from this angle. If there was another object to the side, it would probably be reacting to that light, right? But as it stands, I think we're just going to leave that one. One interesting thing would be to try to use this as the light source. So the rest of the ball is lit by this glowing LED whatever. The thing with that is that I sort of have been thinking I want this area to be of the highest contrast. That also means that while this is the lightest part of the drawing, I also want the darkest part of the drawing to also be around here. That would suggest that we have a light source coming from here, right? That's making this part of the ball, lighter, and this part darker, except for this glowing circle. So I think that is what we're going to try to do. The last thing, really, of the features of the ball is that there's an interesting texture on this part of it, and these are kind of look like scales. I'm not going to put a whole lot of effort into this, and that is completely through laziness of my own. If you want to give more effort into these scales, particularly with like their placement, so that you're not just randomly drawing them like kind of I am. Alright, so I am getting kind of tired of fiddling with this camera and the batteries and all that. So as a matter of fact, boop, here's the finished drawing. I think I did go over a fair amount of whatever techniques or advice that you can apply not only to drawing the ball from Rocket League, but to greater drawings in the future. The idea of shape and form and the consistency of your perspectives. If you draw the ball from Rocket League, then you can tag NathQArt on Instagram. That's my Instagram, and I'll probably put that on like the story or whatever. See what you guys did. All whatever, 2 of you. And yeah, this was I wouldn't say the drawing of this was all that fun as far as drawings go, but the video editing for this will probably be kind of fun. It does lead to greater drawings in the future. I think this was a fun challenge for me. Yeah, if you have any other cool video game characters that you'd like me to draw. I hear the sewage infrastructure from Super Mario is pretty cool. Perhaps you're thinking about the sword from Final Fantasy, or the sword from I don't know, Halo. Whatever else you'd like me to draw, tell me in the comments, tell me on Instagram, and have fun drawing whatever.